Assalamu alaikum. Today we are going to talk about endodontic procedures and few of the nonsenses that we have to deal with and few conceptual clearances. Number one, I want to talk about the kind of files we use, and secondly we'll talk about the fear of perforation and how to use mechanical means of negotiation as well as root canal cleaning. And we'll talk about particularly perforation because a lot of us have the fear of perforation and we end up perforating too. First thing first, I want to talk about different kind of files. Here we have EDTA that comes into picture too. Different kind of files are in the market and being used. What I like to do is I like to organize my files in a 2x2 piece of gauze. It makes it kind of easy. The files are clean and they're organized, and you can take them out as you use them and put them back in once you're done with the use, after of course cleaning. And then when you sterilize them, they go in an organized fashion to the sterilization. Of course the gauze gets thrown, the files get cleaned, and if you see any bend at the tip somewhere or undue twisting, you're supposed to throw that file away and not use it, because it's better to use a new file than to have a separated instrument in the canal that you end up then spending hours retrieving it or doing an apicoectomy. So if a file is twisted and you see the turns on it undone, throw the file away. It's not worth it. Include that in the cost of doing the RCT. When it comes to file back, you will look at the file that the handles sometimes are thicker and sometimes they are thin. Thick handles are good if you're doing all the filing by hand, and some of the file making companies even make the files with really thick handles and they're easy on the hands. But I'm a big proponent of using reciprocating handpiece. Reciprocating handpieces are slow speed handpieces with push button, and they take your regular files. So you don't have to have any proprietary files like Pro Taper and spend all that money. All you got to do is take a regular file that you use and go ahead and squeeze the back and put the head of the file in, and now all of a sudden you have an instrument, a mechanical instrument for debridement and shaping of the canals. Now the good thing is you use whatever file system you use, and when you bend the file, which you're supposed to have a slight bend, since this is not a rotary instrument, it is not going to rotate or translate the canal itself. What it would do is, if the file is turned like it's supposed to be in like shape of a canal, it goes in and it quarter turns in and then pulls it, quarter turns in and pulls it into the canal. So what it is doing is it's mimicking the hand movement. Anytime we're doing endo, we're supposed to go in by turning the file only a quarter turn and pulling it to scoop out the debris. And this is how you negotiate: quarter turn and pull, quarter turn and pull. That way you end up not breaking a file and you can negotiate any canal as long as you want. The agent that you want to use in negotiation is of course EDTA. It's called EDTA cream for root canal cleaning and preparation. It could be by any name, but this is what you want to use. And this one is Meta Biomed MD Kel cream, but like I said, the brand name does not matter as long as you have EDTA cream. People use liquid also, but liquids are kind of hard to handle and they flow out of the teeth in case you're using it in the upper teeth. With this, you squeeze out a little bit of amount, and here I would do it for you to see. You squeeze out a little. This is actually fairly good enough amount for a little bit of canal negotiation. Make sure you put the cap back on in order to not dehydrate the EDTA that you have taken out. So you take the EDTA, I would take it actually on the file like this. Don't cover the whole file, just the tip. So you introduce it into the canal and you twist it, and you keep negotiating that way again and again and again. Sometimes to introduce the EDTA into a deeper part of the canal, I would untwist the file and kind of use it like a plunger to get the EDTA deeper into the system. What EDTA would do, you can go ahead and read, tissue paper please, you can read that on internet, and it would tell you how EDTA works. It is a chelating agent. It would take away for you even metals from inside the canal. It would dissolve the calcium a little bit and make it easier for you to negotiate. So anyhow, we would like to use reciprocating handpiece. In another presentation I will show you how it works nicely, but I just wanted to give a little basic background about endo. So what you want to do is, if the file is with a bigger head, it won't fit into the handpiece. That's why you want to get the files with thinner heads, which are the standard files. So you want to get that and make sure that it fits into your handpiece and you're able to use it. Now let's say, hypothetically speaking, you run out of the file that you need to use and the handle is already thick. So what you do is you take a diamond burr or an acrylic burr and you trim it and you can make it thinner. But make sure you try to keep it in a hex shape, so as it engages into the reciprocating handpiece, it has a good grasp and grip. That's all. So you can always modify. The second thing I want to talk about is the length of the files, and you'll notice the files come in different lengths. You have 21 standard, 23 millimeter, 25 millimeter, 27, and rarely, if you order, 30 millimeter file. Why do they make number 21 file? I mean, not number 21, but 21 size file. Because from majority of the points where you take the access into a tooth, into pulp chamber, you have to realize that from the access to the tip of the tooth, majority of the time, the length from here to there is 21 millimeter. Whether it be a molar or a sentinel incisor, that has been my experience. So if you put a file in, not from the incisor edge, but from the access, by the time you're done filing, majority of the time the file, 21 size file, would fit perfectly, because that's the length that most of the teeth are in. Even on the molars, when you go on the occlusion, when you put the file in, you will see the total length will be 21 millimeters from the occlusal axis. If you take a look right there, you'll see majority of the time every tooth is going to be 21 millimeters. So I'm showing an example right here, and you take a look at the premolar. You go from the axis, not from the cusp tip, but the axis, and majority of the files are going to be exactly, precisely all the way to the tip. Does not mean that everyone is going to be 100% there, but it's a good start. So start with the confidence that your 21 millimeter long file will take you all the way to the tip. Have that in you when you start out with the endo. Now, when it comes down to doing the access, what you want to do is you want to make sure always that you have straight line access. On the centrals also, lower or upper incisors, you want to have access. Ideal situation would be that you go ahead and you trim away even the incisal edge, but don't do that. You can gain slight curvature access from mid-level of a lower central incisor. Same thing happens with the upper one, and we can show you pictures later on of how the different access points are on different teeth, but this is just to give you a little overview. Now, when it comes down to having the occlusal axis open up, it's a good idea to use a diamond burr to go ahead and trim it. Now, this is a crown prep diamond burr. Okay, it's a crown prep diamond burr, and people talk about perforation. Once you go from the occlusal, the tallest cusp, you got to make sure that you measure from the outside where the CEJ is. And it's very easy to check where the CEJ of a tooth is. How do you do that? You take an explorer, and even if the tooth is covered with the gingiva, all you got to do is take the explorer and you should be able to feel the CEJ. When you feel the CEJ, then you check from the occlusal where the CEJ is. Okay? If you know where the CEJ is, you have to know that there is no way you can cause a perforation at CEJ. Whether you can see the interradicular space or separation on the radiograph or not, it has nothing to do with it. But interradicular separation never comes all the way to CEJ. Of course, a radiograph would show you exactly where the interradicular separation is, and you can kind of measure it on the radiograph. So what you do is you take your burr and you measure it. You say, oh, if for me to perforate this tooth, I have to take the tooth and I have to make sure the blue spot on my burr goes all the way into the occlusion and beyond. That is the only time I'm going to perforate the tooth. So you have to build this confidence in you yourself, and this is a quick survey. You can pick up the handpiece and the burr, take it close to the radiograph without touching it, and say, oh, in order to perforate, how deep do I have to have the burr? So for me, if I had a task to perforate right there, I had to make sure that I take the blue and let it touch the occlusion completely. Okay. In a handpiece, this blue is going to be outside the handpiece. But I would say that if I go in and I'm about 2 millimeters shy of the blue, I can never perforate. So that would give you an internal free hand to move around and say, how much deeper can I go into the tooth without causing perforation? I hope you get that point. Okay, so that is something to keep in mind. Now, sometimes what happens is the patient cannot open the mouth. So this is a little side note. And you have to do a crown prep, let's say on a second molar distal upper, or a third molar even, you have to do a crown prep, and the patient cannot open, and with the bulk of the handpiece head and the burr in it, it becomes too long. So what do? You cannot cut away your handpiece. You can use a mini handpiece, yes, but what you can do is you can also make this burr a short shank one, and it's very simple to do that. You take any burr that you have, a crown prep burr, and here's an example, and it would be full length, and you put another burr into a handpiece and you go ahead and cut the back of the shank off. If you cut the back of the shank, then of course the burr goes deeper into the handpiece. Now you have a short shank burr without buying another one. So that's a good little trick to keep in handy and to use. Now in endo, the basic principle is to make sure that your file only comes across one curvature. You have to assume that there'll be a curvature in the apical 1/3 of the root canal treatment phase. And if your access is only limited from one side, file can only bend once, it cannot bend twice. Okay, so that is why you want to make sure that you have good access. Second of all, as you are doing endodontic procedure, number one procedure is to remove all old restoration. Number two is to make sure that you remove all decay. So these two things have to be done completely and nicely. Once you have done that, then you got to make sure that the pulp chamber is fully unroofed. So that is important. There should be no roof up on top. So if you have gained straight access, you still must unroof the pulp chamber to make sure no pulp horn and no pulp tissue is left there, because that would cause decay, organic decay later on, and it would cause discoloration of the tooth. And that is what I wanted to talk about. So we talked about the depth of the burr, perforation, selection of the files, and thickness of the handle, access opening, negotiation with the tip using EDTA. And now when you're negotiating and you put the EDTA inside, you remember to do a quarter turn and pull, and you go all the way to the tip. And that's where EDTA helps you. Sometimes, let's say you have a hard time finding where the canal opening is. So what you do is you take a piezo handpiece and you turn it on just like you're moving tartar, and you go in and you start pecking wherever you should see a white spot. And when it comes down to endo and you're looking at it, of course you're supposed to have a scope. When you look at a tooth, I'm giving an example of upper first molar. So you have the palatal canal, distal, and mesiofacial 1 or 2. Okay, what you'll see is there'll be a circle, then there'll be white chalkiness, and then brown on the outside. This is natural order of calcification and decalcification. So wherever you see that, start pecking at it with a piezo instrument. And even if there's calcification, you'll be able to get rid of it. One thing to remember, calcification starts from the apex up, not from the crown down. Okay, so when people say the pulp chamber was highly calcified, it's just a temporary thing. It's kind of like tartar buildup. The pulp chamber was calcifying itself. So, but if you take piezo, just like when you're doing periodontal scaling, you go ahead and you start cleaning it, you'll be able to find where the pick is. And wherever you see the pick, then what you do is you take a very, very sharp explorer and you start picking at it. And you should be able to feel a stick just like a cavity. The moment you do that, I would go ahead and start out with number 10 file. We have number 8, but number 8 a little too flexible and they bend very easily. So I would take number 10, which is purple, and go in there and try to engage it. And I know in the engagement, if the file does this, if it vibrates like a tuning fork, I know it's in the canal. It's a very, very good indication. Once it's in the canal, then you put EDT and you quarter turn and you pull. And you do quarter turn and pull till you get deep into it. And you'll be surprised. With EDT and quarter turn and pull, you can negotiate literally any canal there is to negotiate. And once you're there, then I would go ahead and with number 15, I would put it in reciprocating handpiece and start enlarging the canal. And that's all there is to endo. Thank you.